At the end of the day, when we say, I don't really care if Nigeria gets developed or not, I've given up on Nigeria is a closed case. Nigeria is a hopeless situation. There's nothing that can be done about Nigeria. It's going to take 200 years for Nigeria to be developed. I'm just leaving this country. There was once a nation that had life expectancy of 45 years, There was once a country that had, out of every 1,000 beds, 200 fatal bets. There was once a country that had primitive roads, corrupt leadership, corrupt judiciary, and that country is the United States of America, one of the leading nations of the world right now. It was not always like that. At some point, it was the United Kingdom. And United Kingdom also had corruption at some point. Even scholars say even worse than the United States, because there was even misrepresentation of the population. What, some of us say is happening in Nigeria right now. You would see that also that Japan after the World War II collapsed, was literally below poverty line and had to, build its nation. South Korea, I think in the 1960s, was actually poorer than Nigeria. We can go on and on. The list is endless. So Nigeria is poor. If some people say that, I disagree. But if some people say that, so has all that nations been. And Nigeria is corrupt, is a heritage thing, is a ignorant issue, is inborn in Nigerians. I disagree. Why? Because I use data. I do not use sentiments for my analogies, right? Or for my belief systems. Point is, Nigeria is not as corrupt as some countries were when they were in our stage, the developing stage. Now, why is this very important to lay out? Because a lot of people have given up on Nigeria because they feel, my God, Nigeria's corruption is mind-boggling. That's how it was in so many other nations. The level of corruption was actually mind-boggling. Now, other people have said the reason why Nigeria cannot develop is because there's so much corruption. With all due respect to China, we all know that China still has a high level of corruption, but they're still developing, right? And so that might not necessarily be the reason why we're not developing as a nation. And some people will say we can't develop as a nation because of diversity. There's so much diversity. And I agree, it can be a very complex situation when a country is very diverse as we are in Nigeria. So much ethnic groups, so much language, so much culture, right? It's okay to feel a bit anxious about how we can move forward as a country with that level of diversity. But then again, I beg to question, for instance, if my state and my local government is representing me properly and using the funds available properly, how is diversity the reason why state might be considered underdeveloped? I'm using that as an example. Could it be that diversity is not the issue here? And then we'll go back, maybe it's corruption. And then people will say, it has to be political revolution. A lot of scholars have agreed that the United States did not have a political revolution, but rather an economic revolution. And a lot of scholars have also said that economic institutions are so important to the development of most nations, if not every nation. And what does this mean? What am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that for us to move forward as a nation, we need to have the right information, firstly. We cannot live in ignorance, and we cannot stipulate that intelligence is to signify hopelessness. We cannot also say that intelligence is to blame, find, or point fingers at this leader or that leader as the reason why we're underdeveloped, because we are so many millions of people, and we cannot necessarily say it's just this person or it's just that person, it's just 30% of these people causing the underdevelopment of our nation. So then, to me, what exactly is the cause of our underdevelopment or long process to development, if we were to be called a developing nation? I would say that, I've read so many books on economic development, political issues and political development and the rest, and I almost stand alone with my idea. The evident fact or the evidence of every great nation is the will of the people to prosper. While we would like to say that development is a leadership issue in Nigeria, we can see that even in nations, for instance, the United States did not have a political revolution, but I guess scholars call it an economic revolution, where entrepreneurs and innovators created market solutions that drove through poverty, creating an economic outburst, if I were to use that expression, where people were no longer as poor as they once were, some even creating so much wealth that they now became millionaires. And in the economic drive or the market solution, as the market solution created more prosperity amongst the citizens started expecting more from the government. And by that, the government was almost distilled to public service, if I were to use that impression. So for me, policy strategist, what is hindering us as a country to become a developed world is the will of the people, the will of the leaders, the will of the citizens. And also, I can say that there are different types of leaders. And in as much, one of the myths I also think is running against us, pushing us on the wrong side of the tide, is the ideology that political leaders are stand as the gateway to Nigerians' prosperity. And I agree if I were to push back a bit, I would say materialism has played its own role against our progress. And I feel like capitalism and materialism have, there's some kind of interplay between them in our country, where people now think that materialism is capitalism and otherwise. So they value the products that should come from capitalism in materialism, and that works for them. So for instance, if I own a factory and after a period of time, maybe in 5 years, I make some money and I can now buy a beautiful vehicle. In a healthy society, when you see me with a beautiful vehicle, you know that I must have created a certain level of value to be able to purchase that vehicle, and therefore I'm celebrated. But in an unhealthy society where materialism plays a bigger role, the dividends of hard work is now celebrated even without the hard work. So you have a beautiful house, you have beautiful cars, you have beautiful clothing, designer outfits and the rest. Your status goes up in your community and you're celebrated even without the hard work. Almost like the virus in development. So whenever you think that politicians are the reason why Nigeria has not moved forward, just know that what materialism is doing is worse than what the politicians can possibly do. Because materialism is like a virus. It's like a virus. It gets into the hearts and minds of everybody and shuts down the system, just like a virus can shut down a laptop or a computer. So materialism says innovation is not necessary. Creating more jobs is not necessary. Adding value to your community through enterprise is not necessary. What we're going to celebrate is the funds we see. And that culture in itself, you see it tickle between even the religious bodies to the political bodies, to the economic bodies, to the citizens, to the society, to the community. And then there's a dance of what we term corruption. And the society can move forward because we need market solutions, we need creativity, we need talent, right, to build and innovate from their ideas that now transforms the society. One of the ways we can solve corruption is innovation. We see that when we have biometrics now in our passports, so that you would not be able to use someone else's passport easily. I know it still happens. We see that in movies a lot, but easily. That helps. We see that also when we are trying to do this NIN, BVN. We see that with the style of voting now, even though it's not at the smoothest pace right now. But the process is beautiful because that's the process of innovation. That's the process of... I was asking an Uber driver the other day that, why is it that VIO does not like to take money anymore? That's in Lagos State. And they said, because now they get commissions from every charged vehicle or charged passenger or charged driver. That this is not verified. This is word of mouth from an Uber driver. But to think that corruption, what is corruption? There are different things: collecting bribe, nepotism, and the rest. But in this form, we see that by creating such value system, VIO would not want to take bribe from you anymore because there's more incentive, apart from the fact that probably they'll get promoted for meeting up with meeting up with higher targets or whatever. We see that that's how we solve problems. By innovation, we solve problems. And if I were to say, I've said corruption is not unique to Nigeria. I've said diversity is not the problem of our non-development or hindering progress in our development process. I've also said that materialism is a major problem in our development, right? And I've also said that the will of the people, as far as I'm concerned, is so important in the process to develop. And the will of the people hinged on just the politicians, but on all of us. We have the political leaders, we have the economic leaders, we have the religious leaders, and we have the thought leaders. And the thought leaders play a very major role. Even the economic leaders, and then even the political leaders, and then even the religious leaders. So what does that mean? That means that there has to be a collaboration between the four forms of leadership, as I've stipulated. There has to be a collaboration where religious leaders instill values of civic responsibility, values of capitalism instead of materialism, values of, a culture shift, a mind shift on the possibilities that exist in Nigeria and how we can progress to a first-class nation. And, same also for the politicians or the political leaders, whether they are in politics fully or as a consultant or as a playing an advisory role. Politicians have a big role to play, especially political leaders have a big role to play because they handle the public funds and they can inspire in their citizens the will to rise above materialism, the will to envision a nation that is first class, right? And, the economic leaders also play a very major role because data has proven that they are the drivers of growth. They are the drivers of change because they carry the innovations that transform the way things are done on a local level to a much more distilled or progressive level where, systems change and then the hinges of corruption can easily drop from the innovations from economic leaders. Also, the fact that they can also alleviate poverty. And when people are not poor, when people are not hungry, you cannot buy their vote. So we would say, can you imagine this person just sold their vote for 10,000 naira? Well, is that the problem or is poverty the problem? Because if poverty is the problem, then survival is a human instinct. And if people have to survive, then they will do whatever they need to do to survive. Right? So the problem might not necessarily be in the vote selling and vote buying, but in the fact that as a community of leaders, we are not doing enough in our communities to alleviate suffering. So economic leaders play a very major role, and also the thought leaders who are like the engines of change, not just in expanding the problems that exist or stipulating the problems that exist, or I say this all the time, don't tell me you're intelligent if you're only going to call out what our problems are in Nigeria without creating solutions. And you're far from intelligent to me if you publicly insult your country. You're far from intelligent to me. I might be wrong. But to me, you're far from intelligent. So that's not what thought leadership is to me. Thought leadership is action-orientated. When these four leadership roles collaborate, they create a system of change. Because, for instance, an economic leader can say, I would, through my social responsibility, build infrastructures that are needed in society. And so also can the religious leaders as well. When you give charity, it creates moments of joy. But when you build structures, you create decades of transformation or transformational systems in communities. And I really believe that the fact that all these forms of leadership, a lot of them, especially the ones that are really interested in Nigeria's growth and development, are doing a lot. I can mention so many, but I don't want to, because then I might miss so many as well, which would be unfair to the so many that are doing a lot. But this is a call to do more. This is a call for religious bodies to also do more, and to move from just charity to structured transformative systems. When I was studying in a country in Europe, I choose not to mention which of them, I realized that a lot of students can't go hungry because there's several NGOs, several bodies that are willing to give sustainably. So, for instance, if I'm a student, I don't have money, I don't have a job, I have XYZ locations where I can go to every Tuesday or every Friday to not eat, but to be given items that I can use to cook, like rice, cheese, chicken, eggs, vegetables, juice, and the rest. So the collaboration that we need from our leaders is more social infrastructure, because when there's social infrastructure, there's a social security. Now, I agree, in the developed societies, social security is actually a big deal. It's a big deal. And I know it's a collaboration between the government and private, not non-governmental organizations. But I guess it's mostly from the government, if I were to say that, because of the social number and the rest. But my point is, what can we do now to help in, creating development in Nigeria? We need better social security, better social structures. So we need to do more around free hospitals, free addiction centers, if I were to use that word, free food banks. And also, when individuals say, oh, it's my birthday, I want to give out food to the poor, in as much as that's very charitable, I'm not sure if the people you're giving the food, or if your soul benefits from it the most, because it's my birthday, I want to give to the society. Best you create structures or identify structures where giving is sustainable, and you go and give there, or you create some form of cooperative if you want to really, do something mind-blowing for Nigeria. Create some form of cooperative where people can come together and say, you know what, every month we're going to give XYZ to XYZ people. And there's so many structures now to really verify if people are actually in need or not. So many consultant firms doing that right now, where they would go to the house and they would, through Google Map, you can verify that they actually went to that house. Am I saying it's going to be smooth? No, I'm saying that what I'm just saying is we need to build sustainable social structures. Very important. And I guess that's what I have to say for today. I think I've said a lot already, and yes, let's start the conversation from here. Thank you so much.